Ethereum is a decentralized blockchain platform, so it tries to take some of the kind of ideas from things like Bitcoin, from kind of ideas of distributed consensus that have existed over the last few decades, different forms of cryptography, and combine them together into a platform that people can use to build decentralized applications. So basically, applications which can run without dependence on any particular central third party. I'm Vitalik Buterin, founder of the Ethereum project. I started programming very early, like really properly programming around when I was 10. Like before that, for kind of years, I would just do stuff in Excel, but then I started programming games that I would play myself in C++. And then at some point I discovered Python and JavaScript, and I'm like, wait, why does anyone even care about C++ if these languages exist? And then I started playing and programming games on that, and then at some point around when I was 17 or so, I discovered blockchains. I love the syntax. I mean, it feels very kind of nice and pretty. I mean, it has a lot of features that just make stuff easy that like really should be easy. Like support for big numbers, support for like array literals, just being able to make arrays and make mappings and dictionaries and so forth. Like programs that just look nice and clean and take 10 lines in Python just seem to always be 3 times harder in like things like C++. And then in JavaScript, like it's though like not having big numbers and then just like mixing up numbers and strings makes it just very easy to have bugs everywhere. I mean, I do wish Python had some more strong typing, but like otherwise even still, it seems like a nice middle ground. Probably my biggest priority at the Ethereum Foundation is working on the Ethereum 2.0 spec. So this is this kind of big upgrade that combines together proof of work, proof of stake, scalability upgrades through sharding, and a bunch of other kind of improvements to the Ethereum environment, and brings them together into this kind of package that we are very far along in terms of specking out and even starting to implement at this point, but there's still a few more details that need to be finalized. I think at this point we're at the phase where there is no kind of single biggest problem that's way bigger than all the other problems. It's more like 100 little problems. It's like, oh, there's this part of the spec that's not yet finished. Ooh, I discovered this tiny problem. How do we solve it without introducing more complexity? How do we take away more complexity? How do we do this? And then how do we make like the plasma spec better? How do we do that without making it overly complex? Just a bunch of these small issues that keep on cropping up, because like sometimes you're in the mode where you know what they're of a solution and you just need to kind of write it out and implement it, and some of the time you're just thinking about all of the problems and trying to see if there's even any one of them that you can come up with a good idea for. I mean, when I do coding, it tends to more be coding of like prototypes and proofs of concept. So things that then potentially other people would take and kind of turn into production software. And then also like writing out specifications and kind of formulas and things. So I'm definitely closer to pure research, but even in the research area, there are things that are kind of valuable about just writing code, because it basically just forces you to be formal about everything that you're doing, and that by itself kind of reveals things you haven't thought about before. I mean, I think that there's definitely different value that different kinds of protocols are providing, and it would be good to just kind of see the different protocols, discovering what their niches are, and just trying to see if they both kind of provide value to the ecosystem by experimenting and trying out different approaches, but also by I mean, maybe we'll find, moments where we see, like, oh, this protocol makes a lot of sense in this context, oh, this protocol makes a lot of sense in this particular context. I mean, I definitely think that, like, environments that make it easy to build and deploy applications are useful, though at the same time, there is obviously this kind of nagging concern of centralization, especially if, like, half the entire ecosystem starts depending on a particular platform. So at the same time, these things are useful because they provide, like, real gains and, like, developer ease of use, but at the same time, it would be nice if the client implementations in the protocol itself were stronger so that we wouldn't need to resort to these kinds of things for everything. So first of all, okay, I personally really hate how the word DAG has just been overhyped. Like, so first of all, right, like, a blockchain is a kind of DAG. The Ethereum 1.0 chain is a kind of DAG because of how uncle inclusion works. The Ethereum 2.0 chain will be even more of a DAG because of how you have the shard chains and they keep on constantly cross-linking with each other, and then even within each one of the chains, every block has many attestations that then get included into the next block. So, like, those are things that we are totally adopting. At the same time, like, it does seem like there's room for more kind of innovation on the data structure side, but at the same time, it does seem like we are kind of getting closer and closer to understanding, like, what the optimal structures are. And a lot of the kind of possibilities for big improvements are things that I think have already been incorporated into, like, a lot of the Ethereum consensus algorithms. I think the philosophy and the technology are both important. I mean, for Bitcoin and Ethereum as well. So, like, for example, the philosophy of Ethereum, I think, definitely carries over a lot of the philosophy of the existing blockchain platforms, which is this idea that, creating these open public platforms that anyone can participate in, creating this, like, basically extending the kind of ideals of open source to applications that just have to run with shared data between different users. Things like censorship resistance, also just building platforms that work from, like, anyone can access from anywhere around the world. And I think, those are things the Ethereum community cares about, and also just kind of enabling cooperation across wider distances. But those are things that, blockchain communities before cared about to some extent as well. The other thing that's more Ethereum specific is this idea of kind of extreme generality, that this is a blockchain that can be used for, like, really a huge number of different purposes. And so that basically means that, it's not just a cryptocurrency, it's not just a domain name system, it's not just a system for keeping track of, like, how many units of what different tokens people have, or making decentralized exchanges. It's like all of that plus other things that, we haven't even thought of yet. And I think that aspect also does create a more sort of developer-oriented culture, because, like, Bitcoin is an application, for example, and so Bitcoin is fundamentally more about, like, what you can do with it, whereas kind of more general purpose platforms are more about what you can build with it. I would say if you're just entering the blockchain industry, and first of all, it's important to just get a good idea of, like, what the status quo is in terms of what people are working on, what things are possible at layer 1, what things are possible at layer 2, what things are possible from the point of view of applications, like, where research is going. Part of the question also depends on, like, what you see your personal specialty being. So, like, are you a mathematician or a cryptographer? Are you a kind of low-level developer? Are you someone who's kind of interested in working on things, directly related to empowering people in Uganda? Are you are you interested in like solving user experience problems for like millions of regular people, and there's space in the community for people of all types. But depending on that, you might have a kind of different focuses on like whether you want to end up learning kind of the finer grains details of how a ZK Stark works versus the trying to understand more from a kind of economic and business standpoints, like what things the blockchains enable that were not possible without it.
Yeah.
And if you're doing that, then like it's important to try to kind of get your own good understanding of that, so you can try to figure out what kind of a blockchain application makes more sense, more from first principles.